A gatekeeper learns the weight of a door. Grail had worked the iron gate at the Velmore estate for 9 years, and in that time he had turned away journalists, creditors, a television crew that arrived without an appointment, and, twice, men whose intentions required no explaining. He was good at the work. He read people the way a man reads weather, by what they carry, how they stand, whether the stillness around them feels natural or forced. He turned Sable away on a Tuesday morning in early April, and he thought nothing of it. She had come about the nanny position. The advertisement had run the previous week, quietly, through channels that discouraged the wrong sort of applicant. She was younger than Grail had expected, simply dressed, with a canvas bag over one shoulder and a folder of papers she held with both hands. She gave her name. She stated her business without embellishment. When he told her that the household was reviewing credentials through the agency and that walk-ins were not the process, she did not argue. She said she understood. She thanked him. She did not leave. He watched her from his booth as she crossed to the stone bench that sat along the outer wall, 10 feet from the gate. She sat down, set her bag beside her, and placed her folder on her knees. She was not on her phone. She was not reading. She was simply there, in the particular way that some people are simply there, as though the bench were exactly where she intended to be, and she was prepared to remain on it for as long as the morning required. Grail decided she was either very patient or very strange, and returned to his newspaper. He did not know then what the morning was about to require of all of them. The Velmore estate ran on a machinery that had nothing to do with its owner's fame, and everything to do with his exacting standards. Dorian Velmore, the man whose name made importers careful and rivals quieter than they preferred to be, was not a theatrical presence in his own house. He did not raise his voice. He did not repeat instructions. The staff understood what was expected and met it, because failing to meet it was simply not something they considered. He was not cruel. He was exact. And the difference between exactness and cruelty is one that people who have worked for both understand immediately. The physician, Dr. Cathmore, had attended the family for 11 years. He was the sort of man whose confidence preceded him into rooms, a consultant who spoke in the language of settled authority, who never appeared uncertain, who had learned to carry the weight of other people's trust, the way a man carries an expensive coat, as though it were the natural extension of him. He had admired the estate's accounts for approximately as long as he had attended its members, and in the past 3 years, something in him had crossed from the admiration of a professional to the calculation of a different kind of professional. Entirely. Billings had grown. Outside opinions had been gently discouraged. His hold on the family's medical decisions had thickened like sediment, invisibly over time. No one had looked at the invoices carefully. There had never seemed to be a reason. The baby arrived at 5 in the morning. Grail found her. He made his dawn check of the gate perimeter at 5:10, as he always did, and there she was. A Moses basket set into the stone alcove to the left of the gate, sheltered from the wind, with a folded card tucked beneath the handle. She was awake. She did not cry. She looked at Grail with the particular directness of infants who have not yet learned that the world requires anything other than honesty. And Grail, who had 3 grandchildren, and knew the look of a child who was not entirely well, felt something in his chest perform a movement he could not have named. He called the house. The next 2 hours were the kind of hours that reveal a household to itself. The estate manager arrived first, then 2 of the senior staff, then Dr. Cathmore, who came in his car within 30 minutes and took the baby with the assured movements of a man who has been trusted for a long time. He prescribed. He instructed. He told the assembled household that the child was underweight and mildly feverish, but not in serious danger, and that what she needed was the preparation he was leaving with them, rest, and monitoring. He would return in the evening. He left. The baby did not improve. By 10 o'clock, the fever had not broken. By 11, the estate manager was making calls to the agency, asking whether any of the nanny candidates could come that afternoon. The agency said the soonest available was Thursday. The estate manager said Thursday would not do. Grail, at his gate, thought of the young woman on the bench. He looked. She was still there. He called the house again. She came in through the gate with her canvas bag and her folder of papers, and Grail watched her the way a man watches something he is trying to recalibrate. She was the same as she had been at 7 that morning. The same composure, the same economy of movement, but now the quality of her stillness was different. It was the stillness of someone stepping towards something, rather than waiting for it. The estate manager met her in the entrance hall. The interview, such as it was, lasted 4 minutes. He told her the situation. She asked 3 questions about the baby's symptoms and current prescription, and the expression that moved across her face on the third answer was not alarm so much as a very specific attention, the kind that precedes action, rather than worry. She asked if she could see the child. She was taken to the nursery. Grail heard this later, in pieces, from the housekeeper who had been present. Sable set her bag down inside the door. She went to the crib. She looked at the baby for a long moment without touching her, and then she looked at the prepared dosing on the side table. And then she asked, in a voice that was entirely even, who had prescribed the preparation, and at what weight the dosage had been calculated. The housekeeper did not know. Sable said she would need to speak with someone who did. What she had seen, this also came later, in pieces, was not a dramatic error. It was the kind of error that looks like competence from a distance. A dosage calibrated for a larger infant, not a dangerous amount by wide measure, but for a child this size, this feverish, this new to the world, enough to slow what should have been improving. She had seen it before, in a smaller household, in a different county, in circumstances she did not explain and was not asked to explain. She knew what it looked like. She knew what it required. She spent the night in the nursery. Grail's overnight colleague reported this to him in the morning, that there had been a light in the nursery window from before midnight to well past 3, and that at 4:30 one of the kitchen staff had brought up a tray that was not asked for, only offered, because the household had already decided something about the young woman in the nursery that it had not yet put into words. By morning the fever had broken. At 6:15, before the house was properly awake, Sable came down to the study. Grail did not see this part. He had it from the estate manager, who had it from Dorian Velmore himself, which meant it came encased in the particular brevity that man used for things that had moved him. She left an envelope on his desk. Inside was a single sheet, handwritten, precise, without editorial comment, setting out what had been prescribed, what the correct dosage for the child's weight should have been, what she had administered through the night, and the name of the outside specialist she suggested be called before Dr. Cathmore returned. She signed it with her full name. She did not wait to be thanked. She went back to the nursery. The specialist arrived at 9. He was there for 40 minutes. What he confirmed, and the calls that followed to the accounts office and to the medical licensing board, occurred in rooms Grail could not see from the gate, but he knew by the way Dr. Cathmore's car left the estate at 10:30, fast, without the usual pause at the gate for an exchange of pleasantries, that the morning had rendered a verdict. The gate opened. The gate closed. The car did not return. By afternoon the household had settled into a new quiet. Not the taut quiet of a house under Peckett, or the suppressed quiet of a house that knows something is wrong and has agreed not to say so. This was the quiet of a house that had passed through something and come out the other side of it, and was taking a moment to notice. Grail noticed, from his gate, that the nursery window was open. On the third morning, Dorian Velmore came to the nursery. This was not unusual in the days since the baby's arrival. He came each morning, stood at the crib for a measured time, received the update from whoever was present. He was not a man given to visible sentiment, but he was a man who watched things, and he had been watching Sable for 2 days, with the particular quality of attention that he brought to things he was in the process of revising his understanding of. The baby had been fretful that morning, not ill. The fever was long gone, the color good, the intake sound, but fretful in the way of infants who have been through something and carry the memory of it in their bodies without the language to say so. The housekeeper had tried. One of the senior staff had tried. Sable came in from the corridor, set her bag beside the door, and went to the crib. She did not make a production of it. She picked the baby up with the ease of someone for whom this was simply the next right movement, settled her against her shoulder, and began to walk the slow circuit of the room that she had apparently been walking for 2 nights. The baby stopped, not gradually, at once, the way a sound stops when the source of it has been answered. She reached up one hand and closed it around the collar of Sable's jacket, and she held on, and she did not let go. Grail was not in the room. He had this from the housekeeper, who described it the way people describe things they are not certain they have the words for. Dorian Velmore stood at the nursery way and watched. The quality of his stillness, she said, was different from his usual stillness. Usually his stillness was a door that had been closed and locked. This was a door that had been left open. He stood there for a long moment. Then he said to the estate manager who was behind him in the corridor, "The position is filled. Have her room prepared in the family wing." The estate manager began to say something about the staff quarters, which were comfortable, which were standard. "The family wing," Dorian Velmore said, not loudly, not twice. He looked at Sable, who had heard this, whose back was still to him, who went on walking the slow circuit of the room without turning, because the baby was almost asleep, and nothing was more important than that, and, the housekeeper said. His expression was the expression of a man who has spent a long time not expecting anything, and has just been given something he did not know to ask for. He left. His step went down the corridor, and then it was quiet. Grail sat in his booth that evening and thought about doors. He had been good at this work for 9 years. He had read people by what they carried and how they stood, and whether the stillness around them felt natural or forced. He had looked at Sable on a Tuesday morning, her canvas bag, her folder, her 2 hands holding it carefully, and he had seen none of the things the position required, and sent her to the bench. She had stayed on the bench. She had said when she had no reason to stay, had waited when the waiting made no practical sense, had been let in as a last resort, and had spent the night in a nursery fighting a quiet battle for a child, who had no name yet and no history in that house, armed with nothing but what she knew and what she was willing to do with it. The baby was asleep now, in the family wing, in a room that had been prepared that afternoon, with the particular care the household brought to things that mattered. Somewhere above the courtyard, a light was on. The iron gate was closed. The estate was quiet. The feared man was somewhere inside it, and Grail thought, not for the first time that day, but for the first time with certainty, that the house felt different than it had a week ago. Dear, somehow, as though something that had been missing from its center had been found, or had found its way in, past the gate, past the credentials check, past the long and sensible machinery of a household that had very nearly turned it away. He ought to have let her in the first time. He knew that now. He thought he would know it, going forward. Every morning he opened the gate, that the most important thing to pass through it in 9 years had come on a Tuesday with a canvas bag and 2 careful hands, and he had almost missed it entirely. The light in the family wing stayed on. Grail turned up his collar against the spring cold and went on with his watch.